Sounds good. All right, you can see me okay?
I can see him.
All right, perfect. Thanks everyone for joining today. Really excited to be doing this webinar. Just a quick introduction on me. My name is Pano. I'm the founder of Bokeh Fire. We're a lens rental company based in Philadelphia. A little more on that later. And today we're going to talk about choosing the right lens. There's going to be a lot of examples of photos taken from my personal portfolio and a discussion of the lenses used and how to pick the right lens for each job and so on. So we'll just jump right in. I just want to mention that our website is bokehfire.com, and you can find us on Instagram or Twitter at Bokeh Fire, and on Facebook at /BokehFire. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at support@BokehFire. So just jumping right in here. So a little bit about us. We're a monthly lens rental service, again based here in Philadelphia. We're like a Netflix for lenses, if you will. We offer Canon, Nikon, and Sony lenses on a monthly basis. There's free shipping, free lens swapping, and insurance coverage is included. And we also do free personal lens recommendations, which is part of the reason we're doing this webinars, because we're kind of experts in recommending lenses for different situations. And our basic plan starts at $125 for 30 days, which is a pretty good deal. There's also a 15% off promo code at the end of this presentation that you'll get if you hang tight. So today, really quickly, we're going to do a quick intro. We already did the intro. We're going to talk about characteristics of lenses. Again, this is a beginner-oriented seminar or webinar, but it's going to progress into a little bit more complicated stuff. So whether you're a beginner or more advanced, I think you'll find something useful in this webinar. We're going to talk about assessing your shooting scenario, and then we're going to go into example photos, and then conclude there and take some Q&A. So there's, just jumping right in, there's two things that matter. This is all, in my opinion, my 17 years of taking pictures, and this is kind of with regards to choosing a lens. There's two things that matter. One thing is choosing the right lens, and the second thing is using it to its full potential. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit more. But it's important to use the lens that you have kind of in the maximally creative way that you can. So we're just going to go really quick over focal length. The wide angle is generally considered, anything wider than 50 millimeters, 60 to 40 millimeters. So medium range is 40 to 85 millimeters, and telephoto is 85 to 600 plus. Now, if these numbers mean nothing to you, then you're probably a beginner. So hopefully you can kind of remember that, and obviously the people who have more experience know what they mean. Basically, the longer the focal length, the more it's like a telescope, the more the lens zooms in. And then just note that on entry-level DSLR cameras like the Nikon D5300 or Canon Rebel, you actually take the focal length of the lens and you multiply it by a factor, so it's actually bigger than that. It's more zoomed in, so to speak. And these different lenses and these different focal length ranges usually have different applications that you can see here. So, for example, if you're watching a football game, you see a bunch of photographers on the sidelines. They almost always have telephoto lenses on, because those are sports lenses. Whereas if you're looking at a beautiful landscape or a beach, it's usually a wide angle lens. Zoom versus fixed. There's two types of lenses. There's the kind that are fixed or prime lenses, which do not zoom in or out. Some standard ones are 24 millimeter, 50 millimeter, 200 millimeter. They take sharper images and they're a lot faster in focusing, as well as faster in aperture and letting more light. Zoom lenses are more flexible. A classic one is 24 to 70 or 70 to 200. Those are very, very popular lenses, so we get that a lot. They're more versatile because you can zoom in and out without moving around a lot. The downside, of course, is that they make you lazy. That's sort of a photography quote, is that zoom lenses make you lazy, and that means that basically to get closer, you just stand where you are and zoom, and it kind of takes a little bit away from your creativity. We strongly recommend that all beginners shoot only on a prime, like a 50 millimeter or 35 millimeter, for a month or two when they're getting started. It will make you much better at composition and framing than a zoom lens will. That's just a tip we give to beginners. Again, if you're a pro, apologize for the repetition. Really quickly, aperture, it's pretty simple. Smaller number means a bigger hole. More light is coming into the lens with a smaller number. Most lenses can open up to about 2.8 or f4. There's some really fast prime lenses that can do f2 or f1.4. And then f16 is really 10 hole. What does that affect? It affects the depth of field. Again, just breezing through this. Background blur is called bokeh. Depth of field is how large is the range of stuff that's in focus. So a larger aperture is a smaller depth of field. So what that means is going back here, if you're shooting at f1.4, for example, your depth of field, the amount of things that are going to be in focus are very small compared to if you're shooting at f16, where a lot of different things are going to be in focus, like a landscape. And we'll definitely have a lot of examples in this area. So just a note, when you're shooting it with something like wide open f1.4, f2.8, you have to be careful where you focus because not a lot of stuff is in focus. Only what you're focusing on is actually being shown. On the other hand, if you're shooting at f16 or f22, everything will be in focus, so you don't really have to worry that much about it. All right, jumping into assessing the shooting scenario. This is a kind of the starting point on deciding what lens to bring in you, or maybe what lens to rent or what lens to buy. You know, most people shoot a variety of different things, but some people are, you know, I'm going on a trip for the next few weeks and I want a specific lens for that trip. Or, you know, I usually just shoot pictures of my kid playing soccer or whatnot. So the first step is reading the light, and this is, you know, there's a lot of different types of light. Of course, we could do a whole webinar just on reading the light. But the bottom line is, you know, are you indoors or are you outdoors? Is there a lot of light or little light? Is the light very harsh, like a very bright sunny day? Or is it soft because you're indoors and it's bouncing off the walls? Is it direct light or is it diffused, like a cloudy day would be diffused light? What's the color temperature? You know, is the sunlight in the middle of the day? Is it sunlight at the end of the day? Is it actually fluorescent light? And what's the source and direction of the light? You know, if you're in an indoor basketball court where light's coming from all around, that's very different than if you're shooting a sunset where the light's only coming from one direction. So that's the first step, is kind of reading the light. The second one is, you know, identify your own position and your mobility. And again, there's a whole wide variety of scenarios you could be shooting in, so I try to cover everything because people come to us with all sorts of different scenarios. You know, if you're sitting, recently we had a customer ask us a lens. You know, he's shooting his son who plays tennis, and he's usually sitting in the stands, and he can't really move around. He's just in one position, and he's shooting his son from that position. That's a very different situation than if I'm shooting at a wedding reception and there's people dancing and I'm constantly moving around, right? These are different situations. So identify your own position and how much flexibility and mobility you have. Can you move around? Can you get closer or farther? That's really significant when you're choosing a focal length. And are you able to move? Like if you're constantly moving, like you're on a bus or a car and you're taking pictures out of a train window or whatnot, that's very different than if, you know, you're stationary and you're taking pictures of things that are also stationary. And then the final step there is assess the subject. So is the subject near or far? Again, you know, if you're shooting the moon on a full moon night, that is pretty much as far as away as you can get. So you're going to need a telephoto for that. If, on the other hand, you're shooting a portrait of someone in a coffee shop, then they're pretty close to you, actually. So you're going to want kind of a wide angle or medium range. The telephoto is not going to work in that situation. And then is the subject moving or stationary? That determines the aperture that you're looking at. Because, for example, again, if you're shooting sports, you're going to want a pretty fast aperture, and f2.8 if you can get it, because you're going to want a lot of light in the lens so that your shutter speed can be faster so that the subject isn't blurry. I'm sure all of us here have taken photos where the shutter speed was too slow and the picture is completely blurry. That's usually caused by having a lens that isn't fast enough, quote unquote. That means it doesn't let in enough light. It's an f4, it's an f5.6. Those lenses don't let in enough light to get action shots. And then another thing to comment on in assessing the subject is, you know, what's the texture, the pattern, the tone of the subject? You know, if I'm photographing kind of a stone wall, that's a very different situation than if I'm trying to take a picture of someone's face that's nicely lit from reflected light on the ceiling, right? These are two very different situations, and I'm trying to capture more or less of the image so that affects your focal length. And then I might want if you're taking a portrait, you usually want the background to be blurry to focus your eyes on the subject. So I'm going to care about aperture. On the other hand, if I'm shooting with a landscape or a wall or whatnot, I don't really care. I don't want bokeh. I don't want background blur. So I don't really care about the maximum aperture. Right, so that's how we suggest assessing your shooting situation, is those three things. Think about the light that's going to be there, think about your position, and think about what the subject is, if they're moving around or not, and if they're nearby or not. So let's jump into example photos. The rest of the presentation is actually sample photos, so hopefully you guys find this interesting. Again, these are all taken from my own personal portfolio, and I'm just going to talk about kind of the decision that was made in each one. There's a whole bunch of them, it's about 20 or so, and we're just going to talk about the lens that was used and why. So we're going to start with wide angles, and just a quick recap, they're typically pretty fast, they let in a lot of light. They're less affected by the camera shaking than a telephoto would be. So for example, again, most sports photographers at a football game using a long telephoto, they're almost always going to have a tripod or a monopod. With a wide-angle lens, you don't always need that. If you're doing landscape photography at night or when the sun is down, you might need a tripod. But if you're just walking around the street taking wide-angle photos, you don't need a tripod. They focus pretty fast, and they're usually used for landscapes, indoor events, street photography, cityscapes, or night sky. Of course, that's just some of the applications there's a lot more. You'll even see that they can be used for portraits and whatnot. But let's jump right in. So this is an image that shot a couple years ago here in Philadelphia, in front of City Hall. I was doing a story on bike messengers in Philadelphia. There's a lot of them. And the lens, a quick break here. All the lenses I use are Canon because I shoot on Canon body. However, everything I'm saying applies for Nikon and Sony and all the other ones as well. Of course, focal lengths are the same between manufacturers, and so Nikon might not have a 16 to 35 2.8 lens available, but they do have the 14 to 24, which is close. So just a note on that, just because I'm showing an example with Canon lenses doesn't mean that this doesn't apply to everyone else as well. So this is a 16 to 35, which is a wide-angle zoom lens, and I was shooting at 16 because I wanted to capture the whole scene. Right? If you just imagine if I was only if I was shooting with a 50 millimeter and 85 millimeter, I might have just gotten one of those bikers in it, and that wouldn't be as compelling of an image in this situation. I really want the whole scene. And I'm shooting at f8 because I want the bikes in focus and I want City Hall in focus too. If I wanted just the bikes in focus, I would have shot at 2.8 or f4. Next example. This is the same lens, 16 to 35. It's a great wide-angle lens that Canon makes. It was actually the widest angle L lens that they made until recently when they came out with 11 to 14. But this has kind of been a staple wide-angle zoom lens for many years. This is on top of the arch in St. Louis. You can see the shadow from the arch coming in, taking this picture. And obviously, this is a landscape photo, right? I mean, this is the definition of a landscape photo. It's a wide angle of view, and you're showing, the landscape in front of you. And so, obviously, I went up to the arch knowing that I'm going to have a nice view, and I want a really wide angle to be able to capture everything. I could also bring a telephoto and zoom into specific buildings, but to me, that wasn't really the point of this image. The point of going up to the top of the arch was to capture this wide view. And again, I'm shooting at f8 because I want a lot of different things to be in focus. I don't want, just the building in the foreground to be focusing in the background to be blurry. I want a lot of things to be focused. Now, I could have shot at f16 and even lower than focus, but honestly, when you're farther away, like I was here from the subject with a wide angle, you tend to have a pretty deep range of focus, so not as much focusing. This was obviously the same location using the same lens, and I included this here just to show what you can do with the same lens in different scenarios. So obviously I wanted to capture the entire arch Actually wouldn't have been able to get it with any other lens for Canon at this point, because you can see I'm shooting at 60 millimeters, which is the widest possible angle. At 35 millimeters, meaning if I had zoomed in a little bit on this lens, 35 is still wide angle, but it wasn't wide enough. I wouldn't have been able to get both the base of the arch and the top of it. So that's just a comment between these two pictures. You can use the same lens in the same location and get kind of a very different result. Right here we have the wide angle, it's kind of panoramic, and here we have pointing straight up in portrait orientation, but it allows you to capture the entire structure and show kind of the scale of it. Another thing to note is that wide angles do distort on the edges, and so what that means is that we'll see more examples of this later, but basically anything that's towards the center of the image will kind of look like it's really far away, but it won't be distorted. And things on the edges of the image, like you can see this lamp post down on the bottom left there, it looks like it's tilted at an angle. Obviously it's not. Obviously it's a straight lamp post. But that's what wide angles do. They distort. They push the edges of the image and distort it so it becomes, lines become not straight. This is again the same lens, shooting, again, trying to show the versatility of wide angles. You can do a lot of different things. This is just a fountain here in Philadelphia. It was nighttime, I wanted a fast lens, even though I had a tripod. And basically just try to make the fountain look really big. I got really close up and zoomed out. So it ends up being sort of big and imposing. It's actually not that large of a fountain, but the choice of the lens let me kind of make it very prominent in the image. And you notice that my horizon is level, which means that the distortion is a little bit less noticeable from the edges. If you tilt the horizon a bit, it shows a lot more. Really quick, here is a street photography kind of photo. We're walking down the street, saw this guy, asked him if I could take this picture. This is shooting on the Canon 35mm f1.4. Now, I shot wide open at f1.4. I didn't have to, but I wanted to have the background be pretty blurry so that your gaze would focus on the guy's face, which is the focal point that I chose. Now, just to comment on 35mm, it's a great street photography lens, whether for Canon, Nikon, Sony, whatnot, because it's a really nice angle of view. And you can kind of capture a scene, but not too much. It's not too wide angle. It's not too telephoto. It's kind of perfect for walking around city streets. Like here in Philly, we have a lot of narrow, tight city streets down in Center City, and it's a great lens for street photography. So if street photography is something you're into, definitely recommend trying a 35mm lens for that. This is back to the same shoot with the bike messengers. I included this image just to show the effects of distortion. So this is again 16 to 35, and I'm shooting at 16mm, which is the widest possible angle. And you can see that the bike, the tire of the bus, the wheel of the bus, looks like it's bigger than the bike messenger. Now, obviously, it's a big wheel, but it's not that big. And so this is just to highlight the effects of distortion. There's significant distortion when you're shooting on a full-frame camera at a wide angle, like 16mm. Anything kind of lower than 24mm on a full frame, you're going to get some noticeable distortion. And we'll actually get a couple examples of fisheye lenses later on, which of course have extreme distortion. That's their whole point. So again, just if you compare, kind of the lines look sort of straight in this image, but that bus wheel is not, twice as big as that bike messenger. It looks like it is. One quick comment on this as well is that when using wide angles, anything that's in the middle of the image, like the bike messenger, tends to get pushed out and looks small, while things on the edges get folded and look bigger. So that's some of the notes. This is from a shoot I did actually just last week. I included this photo in here, not because it's an incredible photo, but there's actually one to contrast with it later when we talk about the telephotos. But I wanted to capture the whole scene here. This is some paddle yoga that this group does in Spruce Street Harbor here in Philly. And I wanted to show that we're kind of in the city, there's a river, and there's lots of people doing yoga on these paddle boards. and kind of set the scene. So I chose a wide angle, in this case 20.70, which is again a very, very popular mid-range telephoto zoom, and I'm shooting at 24 millimeters. So just keep this image in mind because in a little bit we're going to show a different, very different one, taking the same shoot at the same time with a different lens, just to show you how different you can get with different lenses, different results. This is for a wedding. The bride was getting ready for a wedding and brought along at 16 to 35. Now, why did I do that? Because I knew that it was going to be tight quarters. Almost always when you have a bride getting ready, whether it be at her house or the hotel room, you're almost always dealing with pretty tight, small spaces, and so you cannot read a telephoto there. It's not going to be useful. You need a wide angle if you want to capture anything. And especially to show a scene like this where the bride's getting, dressed or her necklace is being done by her mother, you're going to need wide angle. So, a 50 millimeter lens even wouldn't have worked in this situation. So you wouldn't have been able to capture both of them. So that's why I brought a wide angle zoom to this. And just to comment on that, whenever you're shooting weddings, you usually want to bring a zoom lens along with you because you never know exactly how far people are going to be from you. They're always moving, whether it be during the wedding ceremony itself or at the reception, and you're going to want that zoom to be able to get in and out faster as else. All right, moving to medium range. They're most like the human eye view. They're typically pretty fast. Well, what does that mean, the first point? The first point means that, if you look at a picture taken with a medium range lens like a 50 millimeter, it's going to look kind of like it would have looked if you were there. It's not going to look zoomed in, it's not going to look zoomed out, it's going to look like you're shooting pocket view. They're typically pretty fast, meaning they let in a lot of light, so they're great for low light situations like night shooting or indoors. They're less affected by camera shape than telephotos are, but of course a little more effective than wide angles are. And they focus fast. They're good for street photos, portraits, abstract photos, patterns, textures, and they're good for documentary, as well as a bunch of other things, of course. This is a photo taken outdoors with a 50 millimeter. Now, I was just walking around, and wanted to take a picture where the subject really stood out. It's not the world's best picture, but the background is blurry, which is nice, and that was achieved by shooting at 1.2. You can also shoot at 1.4, 1.8, and whatnot. With these lenses, they do a good job of separating the subject from the background. This is some more street photography. I was crossing the street, wanted a really fast focusing lens with a lot of light, but I also didn't want to shoot at 1.2 because I wanted to make sure that the woman's belly was in focus, because that was kind of the point of the picture. And so shot at 2.8 and managed to get that. I mean, this is crossing paths with someone in a crosswalk. I was able to get this picture. They were moving, I was moving. It's incredibly sharp if you've ever tried to take a picture of someone walking by you, given the shooting situation. And that was because it's a fast lens that lets in a lot of light and it can focus with it. This is a picture taken completely at night. This is at one of the night markets in Philadelphia. There was not very much light because typically artificial light, light bulbs aren't that bright, but shooting it at 1.2, I'm letting in tons and tons of light. So basically it looks almost like daytime with this photo. And of course the bokeh in the background blur is because I'm shooting at 1.2. Again, you see between this photo and this photo, this is sort of street photography style photos, even this one. And basically, the 50 millimeter is another good choice for that on a full frame camera. If you're shooting on a crop factor body, like some of the more entry-level DSLRs, I wouldn't suggest the 50 millimeter. For street photography, it's going to end up being more like 85 millimeters for you, and that's a little more zoom than you want for street scenes. Here's another picture at the beach, 50 millimeter again, shooting at 1.2, got a really blurry background. Brought this along because I knew that at the beach you can kind of move in or move out as much as you want, and so if you want to get closer, you can. If you want to get farther, you can. And you get kind of landscapes or portraits if you have the flexibility to move wherever you want. This is another picture I took. You may recognize the gentleman in the photograph. Was at an event where he was at. the lens I brought was the 24 to 70 2.8. It actually turned out that it was quite dark in the location, and I should have probably brought a faster lens, meaning a lens that lets in even more light. Had a lot of trouble getting clear shots of him because the 2.8 actually wasn't wide enough. So this is a situation where I brought the standard kind of event photography lens with me, 24-70 2.8, and it actually was so dark in there that I wasn't able to get a lot of clear shots. This is one of the few sort of clear shots I got. The rest were kind of blurry. Excuse me. And another comment on this is that there's a lot of commotion, people moving around, he's moving, everyone's looking around, so there's a lot of motion going on. That fact combined with a low light made it a really difficult shooting situation. Again, going back to assessing the situation, it's going to be dark and your subject is moving, that's going to be really tough. You're really going to need a very fast lens for that. I should have probably used, my 15mm 1.2 or maybe the 85mm. Now this photo and the next one were shot at the same time and same date and same location. I just want to point out I'm using the 50 here. It was the only lens I had with me at the time. And I'm kind of trying to take a landscape photo or a cityscape, if you will. This is Philadelphia. Standing on the South Street there, just kind of curious. And basically I had the 50mm. Normally you bring a wider lens with you for a landscape, like a 35mm or maybe 24. But I had the 50 with me on a photo walk. And so I took this picture. It was okay. I wasn't super excited about it. I wanted more of a wide angle view. So then what I did was this one. I took this. This was actually taken only about 20 minutes after the previous photo. It's obviously in a landscape orientation instead of a portrait. And so the point here is that with the same lens, kind of in the same situation, if you're willing to move around a bit, wait a bit until the light is right, and kind of reframe your picture, you can actually do a lot of things and take very different photos with the same lens in the same place. So again, just a contrast. That's kind of the first one. I think it's okay. It's not the most incredible picture, but I do like the second one a lot more. Me personally, I just think it works a lot better. And again, this was same location, same scene, same thing. All right, moving to telephoto. This is the last one before we go into really quick fisheye and macro. We'll head to Q&A. So telephoto, if you're a beginner and you try to remember what all this stuff means, it sounds like telescope because that's what it is. It zooms in. They're usually long, heavy, and sort of expensive. Sometimes even really expensive. And then they're for specific applications, like sports, wildlife, sun and moon, birds. A lot of times you cannot use telephotos indoors. Not because you're not allowed to, just because you won't get any pictures. They have a minimum focusing distance of several feet typically. And so if you can't focus on something in your own room that's called 10, 12 feet wide, and you can't focus, your minimum focusing distance is 10 feet, you're not going to be able to get a picture of anything. So jumping right in here, the kind of classic, most popular telephoto zoom for Canon, Nikon, Sony, etc. is the 70 to 200 and the 2.8 version of that. That lets in a lot of light. So this was at a bike race last winter. I was really far away from this biker, but wanted to get the shot, and I zoomed in to 200, shot at 2.8 to give a kind of a blurry background, and that's how I got this photo. I brought that lens with me to the event because I knew I'd need a zoom, something that would go all the way from 7 to 200. I knew that most likely, because there was large spaces involved, the subject would be really far away from me. They're not going to be nearby because we're outdoors. So I knew I needed a telephoto for that. The wide angle, unless I wanted to just take landscapes, it's not going to work for getting images of the actual bikers. This is the blood moon that was the lunar eclipse over Philly last fall. This is down at the art museum. I had a tripod. Woke up early in the morning, went down. I brought my longest lens with me. At the time, I had a 70 to 200. You might even want to use a 100 to 400, or for Nikon, it's 80 to 400. Or you could use this lens, like what a lot of people do is they use 70 to 200 for moon and sun shots, but they use an extender, like a 1.4 or 2x extender on it. I had the 70 to 200, and I shot at a pretty small aperture because I wanted to make sure that the building in the foreground was in focus as well as the moon. Obviously the moon with the center, so that had to be in focus as much as possible. Now this is remember when I said that earlier that there was a paddle yoga a wide-angle lens to show the scene, and I'm going to show you a telephoto lens to show how different from a photograph you can take at the same place. This is, again, from last week's shoot. Here I'm using a 135 millimeter f2. It's the same time, same situation, same scene, but it's obviously a very different picture than the one before, the four girls on the paddle boards. This is a very different photograph. We're focusing on one or two specific people. The background is completely blurry. There isn't really a lot of context for what's going on, but it's a very different feeling and a very different composition. And I had those two lenses with me. I had a couple lenses with me actually, and so I used the 24-70 to show the scene, and then I wanted to kind of zoom in and specifically focus on one person, and so I used the 135 f2 to do that. That's a beautiful lens, by the way. Canon and Nikon both have it. It's fantastic for outdoor portraits. It creates beautiful background glare. That bokeh is really nice and soft, and you can shoot it f2 all day long if you want, which is what I tend to do when I'm outdoors. This is the same lens again in sort of an abandoned factory. Again, I wanted to have the focus be on the subject, but have the background be sort of blurred out and draw your attention back to the subject. And I was pretty far away from her here, probably about 20 or 25 yards. But with a 135, you're it's a telephoto lens, so you feel like you're closer. But it has the effect of kind of compressing the foreground and the background because it's a telephoto. This was taken with a 24 to 105 millimeter, which is kind of like a classic travel lens for Canon. It's an f4L lens. This lens we recommend a lot to Canon users who are traveling and they want something lightweight with a bright range. This was taken in Ireland. I was traveling, wanted something light that can do a lot of different things. Brought this lens. The sort of equivalent one that we recommend to Nikon users is a 28 to 300. Obviously, it's got a lot more on the long end, but it's sort of similar build quality, similar image quality, and it's got a nice range that can capture a lot of different things. So when you're traveling, you usually want kind of what's known as an all-in-one lens or a walk-around lens, which is a lens with a broad range that can take pictures of a lot of different things. So that's why this was chosen here. Here's a wedding I shot last year. Again, 70 to 200. This is the 24 to 70 and the 70 to 200 for all manufacturers, Canon, Nikon, Sony, tend to be the kind of most popular zoom lenses for a lot of applications and especially for weddings. This is obviously outdoors. I'm standing really far away from the couple and I'm trying to make them stand out in the background, which is why I'm shooting at 2.8. Just a quick comment here. If you're using a 70-200 and you want the background to be as blurry as possible, you should step as far back as possible and zoom in to 200. That's going to give you more bokeh. It's going to give you more compression than shooting it at a shorter focal length like 70. Same lens here, just taking a portrait of this girl. Again, wanted the background blurry, wanted her to stand out. Do that a lot in case you haven't noticed yet. But I didn't need to go all the way to 200 because the way that the scene was, the bushes and the pathway were getting really blurry just around 50, so that was good enough. This is a sunrise yoga shoot. Again, same lens because I knew I was going to be outside. I knew that I would need to be able to zoom in and out to capture a scene or an individual person. I wanted to zoom. I wanted a telephoto, I wanted to zoom, and I wanted a fast lens because when we started shooting, when the sun was coming up, it was actually quite dark. There wasn't a lot of light. And so an f4 lens would have had more difficulty focusing with that lesser light. I included this image here. This is San Francisco. I included this image here because I wanted to make the point that you can use telephoto lenses for landscapes as well if you want to. I said in the beginning that wide angles are used for landscapes, telephotos are used for portraits and whatnot, but you can always be creative and use a lens however you want, right? So here I was up on this hill. I had the 70-200. I also had a wider lens in me, but I didn't really want a wider. I wanted that compression that the telephoto gives you where everything looks kind of squished together instead of being spread out, which is what a wide angle does. So just a quick tip, you can always use be creative about how you're using your lenses. You can always use a telephoto to take a landscape photo if you're far enough away. And at the same point here, this is Napa, the vineyards. I wanted to just convey kind of like large expanse of grapes and vineyards, and use, again, a telephoto to take what is essentially a landscape photo. But I shot it, I don't have it written here, but I shot it at 2.8 to kind of focus on a specific section of the vineyard and leave the rest of it blurred. Really quickly, moving to macro lenses. The way to remember what they do is that they're like a microscope. They can focus very close to something. You can see examples of this in a minute, but they're basically the only lenses that can really focus close to something. Your standard typical lens, an 18 to 55 or a 24 to 70, can't focus closer than about, usually it's about like 4 or 5 inches. If you need to take pictures of something really small, like jewelry or food, you're a food blogger, or you're taking pictures of some jewelry that you make, or insects or coins or whatnot, a standard lens is just not going to work because it cannot get close enough, and the magnification is not strong. So this is using a 100 millimeter macro for Canon. The equivalent Nikon is a 105 millimeter macro. You can't really tell how big this flower is. It's not very big, but what you notice is that the background is nicely blurred. That's to make sure that people know. But because you couldn't tell how small the flower is and how large it is, I also included this picture, which is obviously a quarter. Most people know what size that is. You can see that you can get really close up to it. You can really get all the little details. There's a couple of nicks on his forehead here. There's a couple scratches on this one. And you can see the kind of incredible level of detail that you get with a macro lens, which is, again, which isn't possible with a regular lens. You just could not get this close. And so one very common application of this is if you're shooting weddings, which a lot of people do, and you want to shoot kind of the jewelry or the ring or the bride's necklace or earrings or whatnot, or details on the dress, you're going to need a macro lens for that if you want to get kind of a very impressive close-up shot. And so they are specialized lenses, but they do stuff that other lenses can't do. This is obviously a picture of a lens taken with a macro lens, and the fact that you're able to see the detail on the lens surface and even a little bit of dust and whatnot on it. That's because of the fact that we're using a dedicated macro lens for that. Again, you could have taken a very similar image with a Nikon 105. And then finally, common application is jewelry, whether you're making and selling jewelry online or whatnot, or shooting at a wedding, you're going to want a macro. One thing to note is that there are some lenses that have macro capability built into them, even though they're not dedicated macro. So the 24 to 105, which I mentioned earlier with that picture of Ireland, that has a macro capability. Now it can't get as close as this lens can, this lens, but it can still get pretty close when you're using this. This is just a bracelet, so it's small, but you see. All right, really quickly, fisheye. This is kind of a specialized category, like the macro. The name says it all. It kind of gives you this weird distorted look that the museum are fixed. They have a massive angle of view, and by definition, they're distorted. That's the point of a fisheye, is to distort anything. And you can use for a bunch of different things. They're usually not used for architecture photography because they bend lines so much. But, excuse me, they can be used for sports and that stuff. So here's an example. Obviously these lines are completely straight because they're in the crosswalk down in Center City at City Hall in Philadelphia here, but with the fisheye, the Canon 8 to 15 millimeter, they look really distorted. They look very bad, which they're not. Here's another example. So there's two pictures here. This is the picture of City Hall from the inner courtyard, shot at 15 millimeters, and then this is at 8 millimeters. So zoomed out, you see a lot more. You can actually see it's a 180-degree angle of view. You can actually see someone standing down there at the bottom. And if you look up at the top, you can see almost more on the other side. So this lens is showing practically everything. And again, this is the 8 millimeter, and this is the 15 millimeter angle view. It's distorted, but not as much as the full fisheye effect. This is inside Eastern State Penitentiary. If you're local to Philadelphia, then I would suggest you check it out. It's pretty cool. Obviously, these mirrors on the sides here are straight. They're not curved, but you see that a 15 millimeter fisheye really bends the lines a lot. And then once again, City Hall. Like these pictures are in black and white primarily to highlight the lines and the distortion effect. So if they were in color, you would be a little more distracted by things, but kept them in black and white for that purpose. You know, obviously, City Hall is a straight building with straight lines, which I distracts that. So in conclusion, and we're going to get to Q&A really quickly now. In conclusion, you should assess your shooting situation before you head there. You know, what am I shooting? What is my flexibility in moving around, and is the subject moving, and what's the likely to be like? You should pick the right lenses for that shooting situation, but you should also use them creatively. You know, for example, using a really fast lens that shoot at f1.4 to blur out the background, or use a telephoto lens to shoot a landscape, which really kind of compresses it and makes it a little more impressive than a wide angle. So those are the three things you should do. And then, of course, practice, practice, practice. Use different lenses in different situations. See what works for you. Everyone's shooting different things most of the time, and so try out different stuff and see what works. A couple resources. So on our website, we have a free lens recommender. It's at this link. You can also just find it by going to our website and going down to the blog section, and you'll see it. It's one of our recent posts. It's called the Lens Recommender 3000. Collages.net is a good resource. It's sharing some images, and then a couple other websites. Check out stuff. But one thing to keep in mind when you're reading like Amazon reviews, photos, reviews, you know, everyone has a different need. You might be reading about this is the best lens ever for, you know, whatever that person is doing. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the right lens for you, given what you're doing. You really can only know by trying it out and seeing. And so that's where our three recommendations come in handy, because we do have a lot of experience shooting different types of situations, and so we can kind of quickly direct you in the right direction of what lens you should be looking at. This is the moment you've all been waiting for, the promo code. You can get 15% off your first month at Bokeh Fire, renting any lens. Just use the code COLLAGES when you're signing up. And this promo code is good until the end of September. It's good for any membership. So you can rent any of the lenses we discussed or for other ones as well. Finally, I just want to say thank you very much to Collages for hosting this, and thank you all for listening in. Hopefully it was helpful, and we'll start taking some questions.
All right. Thanks, Pano. So let me change the screen sharing back over to myself. If anyone does have any additional questions for Pano, feel free to chime in here. And let's see. All right, here. So, want to just put this out there that if you guys have any questions afterwards, you can always email me, webinar@collages.net, and the website that Pano is here with is Bokeh Fire, and with the coupon code COLLAGES, you'll get 15% off your first month. Also, I guess, Pano, one other thing one of the things, you know, is mentioning how important, or not important, but how valuable it is to be able to rent lenses rather than actually purchasing them. Do you want to give a little more insight about about renting them as opposed to actually putting the money up front? Because obviously lenses are really good lenses are extremely expensive. So
yeah, absolutely. So most people don't realize, but Canon and Nikon each make 85 different lenses for their camera bodies. And so what that means is that there's 85 different specialized lenses that each do a different thing. And most beginners don't, it takes years to kind of try out a lot of different lenses and know which ones you want. But especially for beginners where you're not sure, you don't want to spend $1,000 or maybe even $2,000 on one lens if you're not sure it does what you need. And you haven't had a chance to use it, especially in those situations. renting, is a really good option because you just save a ton of money. Don't commit to something that you might not end up using. One of the biggest complaints we hear from people is, I bought this lens because someone recommended it to me, and then I found out that that's not what I was shooting, so it's kind of just sitting in my closet, and that's kind of a waste of $1,000 or $2,000 there. So the great thing about renting is you can try out different lenses before you decide which one you want to buy, and of course the great thing with Bokeh Fire is that there's unlimited swapping, so in your month-long membership you can try all of our different lenses and figure out which ones you like the most.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it is so expensive to buy all the lenses that you want, and especially if you want to try one out before you actually buy it. It's definitely the way to go. So one question that I have here is referring back to your macro slide, and the question was, isn't a true macro a 1-to-1 ratio?
That's not necessarily true. So macro really just means it describes lenses that can focus very closely. That's actually what it describes. 1-to-1 is great, but the majority of macro lenses can't do that actually. So 1-to-1 is kind of the most you can get without any adapters typically. And it's great if you can get a 1-to-1, but there are macro lenses out there that do not do 1-to-1. They do less than 1-to-1.
Okay. And we're getting a few people are asking who your favorite photographers are to follow and kind of get some inspiration from.
That's a good question. Unfortunately, it really depends on what your type of photography is. There isn't really one answer for everyone. I'll give you an example. If you're into landscapes, then there's some great landscape photographers out there that you can check out. Trey Ratcliffe is one, for example. If you're into photojournalism or weddings or portrait photography or fashion photography or even sports photography, these are all very, very different fields. And so what I would suggest, rather than pointing out names for each one of these, is just kind of Google like top sports photographers, for example, if that's something you're interested in, or top wedding photographers, and you'll get. I mean, there's so many photographers, there's so many great photographers out there. And just go on Instagram or Facebook, and you'll see there's thousands of professionals across the U.S. that take amazing photos. Whether they do it for themselves, shooting weddings, shooting portraits, shooting fashion, or whether they do it for National Geographic or whether they're newspapers or whatnot. So yeah, and of course I should mention one thing, which is that if you follow the Bokeh Fire Instagram or Facebook, what we do is we put out sample photos and give tutorials like in our posts, and so that's one great way to see photos and learn kind of how was this photo taken, what was the lens that was used, and what were the settings. We try to educate basically with our social media, and so that's one thing we suggest is starting out.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so one last thing that I wanted to say is that anyone out there that doesn't already have a Collages account, once you do your lens rental and you have some great photos that you need to post, make sure you check out Collages. Right now we have the free sign up and a 30-day trial to try out our image galleries, as well as our digital brand books, which are the mobile apps for your phone. And for anyone out there that's new to Collages or may have come here from the email that Bokeh Fire sent out, we actually started online hosting images way back in the day, right in 1999. So we are one of the pioneers here. And if you do have any questions at all, you can always email me at webinar@collages.net. Once again, check out bokehfire.com. You can use this coupon code Collages, and that'll give you 15% off the first month. And then also, Pano, when does that expire? September 30th?
Yeah, at the end of September.
Awesome. Well, that's all that I have right now, Pano. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say, or but I'll let you talk if you have anything else to say.
No, that's all. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone, and just a note that this is being recorded and will be available online. I think Kevin's going to have the link.
Oh, yes, I forgot to say that. So we will have this on YouTube later tonight / early tomorrow morning. We'll be sending an email out about that where you can watch it. And then, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email us, webinar@collages.net. Thank you, Pano, again, for another great webinar. And hopefully we see you guys at the next webinar.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Pano. Have a great day. And everyone out there.